Good afternoon, everybody, and hope you have enjoyed the sessions today morning, and also hopefully the food and a little bit of networking that perhaps have gone through. But now we are getting ready for the next session. Feel free to continue having your lunch, and at the same time, we do have some food for thoughts. And this is the planner session that we do have. Dr. Randa Radwan that is joining and giving us the plenary talk today. A little bit about Dr. Radwan. She does have a PhD in transportation safety engineering from George Washington University, and master's and BS in electrical engineering from Rice University. My familiarity to her goes back in 2019 when we both were leading a Center of Excellence sponsored by USDOT, and enjoyed conversation with her throughout the different occasions that we have had the chance to talk, and always being impressed by her vision, and the good thing about her is that she has been everywhere in academia, industry, and also on the government side. So right now, Dr. Radwan is serving as the Senior Advisor for Safety Mobility at the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Research and Transportation at USDOT, where she's having the opportunity to contribute to OSCR's commitment to transform the nation's transportation systems and build a better transportation future for all. Dr. Radwan has over 30 years performing and directing transportation safety research at DOT, transportation research centers in academia, and consultations with industry. She recently served as a principal investigator on an occupant demographics study for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, providing insight on gender equity in real-world crash perception. With that, I would like to welcome and invite Dr. Radwan to give us the plenary talk today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali, for this very kind introduction. I want to share that I'm excited and very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to learn about existing, ongoing, and new research initiatives under both centers. And I wish I could have been in 2 rooms this morning, but my evil twin decided not to join. And of course, opportunity to meet you all. So with the advent of emerging technologies, and specifically I'm thinking automation, connectivity, and artificial intelligence, and those becoming more integrated in our daily lives, both our society and the world at large are undergoing a paradigm shift. Now, with the historic federal investment in the transportation sector, along with that advent of these technologies, there are much opportunity. However, I believe as a research community, we have a challenge. Can we leverage the investment, the big resources with these advanced technologies to institute structural and system changes? Can we, when we develop new applications, use a systems-based and equity lens such that we change the playing field for the BIPOC and other underserved communities? So with that challenge, I'd like to provide a little bit of motivation. You know, I always like to go back to the crash environment, the mobility environment, and then I'll share with you some federal program that you might be aware of. And hopefully at the end, we can open it to some discussion, because I would also love to hear from you. So, as recent laws, the bill, as probably most of you are familiar, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, they present an opportunity, funding for an opportunity to encourage locally driven land use changes and reinvest in existing communities, including rural Main Street revitalizations and transit-oriented and walkable development. Now, of course, I'm generalizing, but these are all key areas. The advanced technologies, including connectivity and automation systems, are transforming how we think about mobility systems and how our needs can be met, to include consumer choices and options. With that in mind, I just want to take a second to discuss our motivation. And here, I'm going to share a few slides that I borrowed from the director of the League of American Bicyclists. Last week, we were at a conference, and he presented that from the Road Safety Annual Report 2023, because I was putting together the same data, but he had it there, so I thought, very nice presentation. So here, what's being compared is the road fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants for a range of countries with multiple, different, various, diverse development. And as you see, the US, we're not doing very well, you know, in comparison to other parts of the world. So our rate is high. Now, it's not just became high. This, I took the data from the OECD, and you know, OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation, and it's a forum where governments of 37 democracies with market-driven economies collaborate to develop policy standards. And basically, these countries are ranked very high on the Human Index, Income Economics, and as such, they're considered developed countries. So, and this is a range of 30 years. So we're going from 1994 to 2022. And if you look at France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, they all have succeeded in a continuous downward trend of this number, which is a rate of accident deaths, road accident deaths per 1 million inhabitants. But in the US, we started doing a little bit better in the first couple of decades, but the last decade, not only we flattened it, will increasing. Now, you could say we drive more miles, but when you look at the deaths per miles traveled, and here the graph is kilometers, because it came from Europe, but we typically think of VMT, vehicle miles traveled, you can see we're really not doing as well. So we have a persistent problem. Now with that, other nations, and again, these are mainly developed nations, have been able to decrease or have a reduction in the number of deaths. And as you go from the left side of the axis, we are on the far right, and we are just before Colombia in terms of we have an increase. So on a national level, now of course, I'm not going to go into the details, but the breadth of knowledge in this group, we know about impairment, we know about speeding, we know about belt usage, but I will not go into this detail today. Now, I'm going to just do some highlights, and again, I feel I'm preaching to the choir here today in terms of disparities, whether it's related to land use or to race and ethnicities. And this morning, I think Dr. Asad talked a little bit about the Equitable Transportation Community Explorer data set. And per the measure of transportation insecurity, we have more than half of all tracts that are considered rural in the US are in the 81st percentile for transportation insecurity. And what does transportation insecurity mean? The people are unable to get where they need to go to meet the needs of their daily lives regularly, reliably, and safely, and as well to get the necessary goods delivered. And this morning, we also had that discussion in the track there, if we're going to bring goods to people versus people to what they need. So that's something important to keep in mind. And so crash fatalities on rural roads are 2 times higher than urban roads. And we have 20% of the US population living in rural areas, but 40% of all road fatalities. 34% of all public highway grade crossing fatalities occur on rural roads. Keep that in mind. Now, in terms of, a little bit this morning, we talked about health needs and discrepancies in rural area, but something that caught my mind, you know, that emergency response time are more than twice as long in rural areas, and we all know about the golden hour, so that's an area of need. Now, over 20% of Americans 65 and older reside in rural communities, and as we age, you know, we tend to have more health issues. We have accessibility, so that's important. And we're a growing nation. We are a growing older nation. It's the best way of putting that. Now, for a second, we saw this graph this morning from one of the presenters, so but it was another track. And this is just, these are rates per million vehicle mile traveled of fatality rates, and the blue is rural, the rural line, and the orange, the most bottom, is urban. And, you know, we've always been at higher rates in rural. Now, they converge a little bit, but it's still, you know, about 60% more. So we know that there's higher risk. With that, I'd like to move to another area of disparity. And this is based on a study that NHTSA did in 2018, and where they looked at basically race and ethnicity groups. And we have to start by saying that race ethnicity reporting differs by source. Multiracial people could be misrepresented. These data are not that, I don't want to say accurate, but are not mainly reported, but still they give us some insight. And here we're looking at fatalities per the first row of person mile traveled, and the second row is by person mile traveled in a passenger vehicle. And I want to note that because then I'm going to mention something about pedestrians. So American Indian or Alaskan Native, these rates are all relative to whites. So we're saying 280% higher risk, the rate. That's what I call significant. And when we look at the Black or African American, again, the rates are exceedingly higher, 60% or more. Now, interesting, the Asian community seem to have the lowest rates. Next, I want to move to pedestrians, and this is fatalities per mile walked. And again, this is a very high rate, 500 times. Black or African American communities designated around 200 times. So this is a study done by NHTSA. I'm going to just cite some other research by different groups because it's the same story, but, you know, just to make sure that we have a different perspective. So there's a group called smartgrowthamerica.org, and they produce a report called Dangers by Design. And basically, they came up with the same results given that they are using the same data sources. So this is a rate of, on the far right, which is American Indian Native 4.8 divide by 1.5, you'll get the same rates. But they took it a step further, and they looked at lower income areas. And so they brought in that disparity as well. And you can see the rates. So on the left side, folks who make about 25 to 43K a year, and their rates are 330 times, 3.3 times versus folks who make 93K or higher. So economic disparity is important as well. Now, some more research done by other researchers. This is 2018 by Mansfield, and he found that and his sources of data, again, CDC, I think, was one of the sources, but for every $1,000 decrease in census tract median income, pedestrian fatality injuries expected to increase by 1%. And again, lower income, median income, and high proportions of BIPOC residents are found to be associated with more pedestrian injuries. And then they said, okay, these variables may be proxies for traffic exposure, deficient built environment, which may reflect a lack of historic investment in the neighborhoods where this population concentrated. I think this just reflects the history. This is a factual thing that happened. You know, we need to learn our history. Another research, which is more recent, this is for children. The numbers I cited before were everybody. But I thought, okay, let me look at the children, you know, because in urban communities, we tend to have more walkability, but how are we doing? And I'm citing the work by Dr. Kendi, and his data source is CDC. And the comparison between rural and urban, 30%, 1.3 times the risk of death in rural versus urban. And when we bring in ethnicity and race, the rate of death of Black and American Indian pedestrians, children under 19 years old, is close to 200 times, so 1.8 times. So keeping that in mind, you know, what are these factors underlying these inequities? Pervasive impact of poverty with families with children, economic disparities in access to public transportation, systemic racism perpetuated through zoning laws targeted at racial and religious minorities, disparities in the investment of transportation safety measures such as sidewalk, separate pedestrian from vehicles, so land use, built environment, and more. The low-income areas often have interrupted sidewalks, and we know about bifurcated communities, and now we have major government projects to reconnect communities, but this is a fact on the ground. So low-income areas have interrupted sidewalk networks and larger roads with higher traffic burden, which increase both the likelihood of traffic conflicts between pedestrian and vehicles. Now, I'm not citing these numbers, but there are differences, a bit of differences in human behavior, but more second-order effect to this, you know, in terms of speeding, you know, maybe alcohol use and unbelt use. So there is a little bit higher proportion, for example, in the Black and African American. We have to acknowledge it, but it's not the main order effect, and that's why I'm not sharing this. Now, with that, just keep that in mind. So we're motivating. So what, from the federal perspective, this plan was cited in almost all the presentation this morning. So in December 2022, USDOT put together our D&T plan. And the strategic goals, which reflect the administration priorities as well as the DOT at large. So we have safety and the grand challenges toward zero fatalities, economic strength, global competitiveness, of course. We want a resilient supply chain system, equity, and here's where the concept of equitable mobility for all, climate and sustainability, zero emissions, and transformation. Because we want to have a very substantial change in our system. So these are kind of the goals and challenges. So any research that the underpinnings of UDSC research are the DOT, the general DOT strategic plan, the research and development strategic plan that I just spoke about, and of course the National Roadway Safety Strategy. And we have some underlying priorities in terms of innovation. And I would urge you, if you hadn't had a chance, to go and you know, have a reading assignment and take a look at all these. They're not that long, but they're very informative. And so the graphics I have right under, these are the DOT strategic plans, rather than the research and so the overall department, organizational excellence, safety, economic strength and global competitiveness, equity, climate and sustainability transformation. Everything we're doing now is grounded in the safe systems approach. And with the same system approach, is basically we're taking the blame away from the human, human-centered. We need basically safer roads. Humans are vulnerable. The responsibility is shared by everyone, by the system, by the planners. And we need to think of safety in a proactive way, and cybersecurity, and resiliency, all of these. And redundancy as a system is important because humans and systems are fallible. Now with that, so at DOT we envision a people-centered transportation system that provides safe, accessible, reliable, equitable, and sustainable transportation system for all through purpose-driven research. So the data should motivate us, and innovation for this and future generation. This is a nice graphic that my leadership likes a lot, so I wanted to make sure to include it. So data-driven, a transportation system of the future, what does it look like? It's an integrated system of systems. We have the intelligent, whether it's AI and subsystems, data-driven, secure and resilient, and cybersecurity. I think the head of the center just left here. Adaptive, technology is changing. We need to be adaptive. Connected, especially in the rural context, we need connectivity. Sustainable, people-centered, and saved. With that, just briefly, as you may know, DOT is multiple modes, and it's a bit decentralized. Each of these agencies has their own focus. And happy to talk about that individually all later, but I'll just name them. There's the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Railroad, Federal Transit, Federal Motor Carrier, NHTSA, Pipeline, and Safety Hazard. Now, with the bill, we've had really a large increase in budget, and where you put the money where your focus is, right? And so I wanted just to share a pie chart of the investments in 2024 in the President's budget. And the President's budget is what we submit to the President, and of course we may get appropriated something different, but pretty much we will get something along those lines. So as you see, the biggest expenditure is on safety, 34%. Transformation, we want to transform the whole system. Climate and sustainability, but both equity has increased, and then comes economic and global competitiveness and organizational excellence. Now I'm just going to move on and give you some sample of bill-related emerging technology programs that have a safety and equity lens. It's hard to talk about safety and equity without discussing the Justice 40 initiative. And initially, this was one of the first things that the President signed in his first week in office. Basically directs 40% of the overall benefits of certain investments, including clean energy, energy efficiency, added transit, affordable, to flow to disadvantaged communities. Well, we've taken it to be part of every research initiative or notice of funding opportunity to qualify with that. Now, I wanted to discuss the ATTAIN program. Anybody familiar with the ATTAIN program? Okay, we have a few people. All right, so it started in the FAST Act, the bill, so we have up to 2026, 60 million a year, and basically it is a program to provide competitive grants to deploy, install, and operate advanced transportation technologies to improve safety, mobility, efficiency, system performance, intermodal connectivity, and infrastructure return on investment. And what came with the new bill, that a minimum of 20% of the amounts available for this program should be reserved for programs with a focus in rural areas, serving rural areas. I'm going to give you just a few samples. There's a lot of them. But this is a sample of ATTAIN, which has been recently awarded. When I say FY22, that's the funding from FY22. This is how it works. This is it. For safety, rural, disadvantaged, community-focused projects. Citing a program in Arizona, which technology is proposed to apply to CV2X, Vehicle to Everything Solution, and for Vehicle to Infrastructure Functionality. And it is enabled rural highway traffic control signal And basically the consideration for Justice 40, there are 4 opportunity zones, 10 disadvantaged communities, and additional areas of persistent poverties using the indices that DOT developed. A second project I'd like to highlight is Utah Connected Communities. And again, there's CV technology and applications for safety, mobility, data analytics, including deep enforcement learning, AI, machine learning, and data sharing tool. Again, the applicant notes that several deployment locations are designated as historically disadvantaged communities. 2 more projects to highlight under Attain. This is for Delaware and DOT, and it is the traffic management and safety for flooding roadways, because this talks to the sustainability and resilience, and vulnerable users. So the technologies proposed: flood protection, response planning for traffic operations, machine vision, and CV for intersection technologies. Last but not least, highlighting Maryland DOT on Route 50 and the spectrum of technologies to be adopted, from traffic sensors, curve warning systems, and incident management. And of course, Route 50 corridor, there's a lot of major cities that are classified as disadvantaged. Now next, how many of you folks have heard about SMART? Okay. So SMART also is a bill-funded project, and it's basically funds demonstration projects and focus on community or smart city technologies. It's $100 million for 5 years to eligible projects in state and local government. But what's interesting about that is 30% is designated to rural communities. And I'll get to the technology areas, but what's been awarded in FY 22-23 is really a wide spectrum across the country, as shown by the map of the US here. I'm going to highlight a few SMART projects that are pertinent to our discussion today. And there's an NCDOT one in the bottom. But so for the top one is City of Talladega. I hope I'm saying it right, in Alabama. Our folks in Alabama can talk. And this is basically so passive pedestrian detection and adaptive signal with the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. The second project is for the Confederation Tribes of Yakama Nation in Washington State. And this will deploy a purpose-built sensing and alert system on a rural highway to collect key safety and road condition data and send safety message in real time. This is where we can make an impact, real-time data transmittal. Last here but not least on this page for NCDOT, and this is connected also vehicle messages to existing third-party apps for travelers, including road closures and work zone data. And as we all know, work zone is an area that we really want to address for. City of Detroit, AI-equipped privacy-preserving camera solution for near-miss and crash detection to drive safety infrastructure investment. As you probably can sense from the stuff that I sampled, all these technologies can be portable to other areas, right? So we can, once proven in one area, we can probably apply them in different areas. Alaska, using drone technology to conduct infrastructure inspection, and drone technology in rural areas is going to be helpful in so many different ways. So hit that one together, ice road conditions, partnering with Alaska Native and rural colleges. And last one I will highlight is Wisconsin DOT, and basically looking local work sites, integrate data with existing for work zone data exchange. So this is another way that we're, kind of synergize redundancy, use data from different systems for better decisions. Just wanted to highlight the technology areas in SMART. So we're talking about smart grid, sensor-based infrastructure, commerce delivery and logistics, and that can be, application with the rural areas. Smart traffic signal, again, also coordinated automation, innovative aviation, and here they're talking about UAS, connected vehicles and system integration. Now next, I want to highlight a program called the Thriving Community Program. And this is something that was touched upon this morning, that We know there's lots of money, but there are no project managers. The entities don't have time or to get the money. So this basically provides 2 years of no-cost intensive technical assistance to under-resourced and disadvantaged communities to help them identify, develop, and deliver transportation projects to achieve locally driven economic development, health, environment, and mobility. And 2 days ago, the Secretary announced funding, DCP funding, for 112 communities, totaling $23.6 million. What's interesting, for the communities that were awarded last year, of the 64, 37 of them, because of that assistance, were able to apply for federal grant, and they've won federal funding for the communities through the Safe Street and Roads for All, Rebuilding America, RAISE, and RAISE is more of an infrastructure, billions of dollars, and the Rural Tribal Assistance Program. What's interesting this year is TCP had something called capacity builders. So basically, each entity, they awarded 3, has $4 to $5 million each to collectively support their communities based on their common technical assistance needs. So now kind of train the trainer kind of thing. So this is something that I think is very helpful. I will just cite an example, supporting lower capacity communities, which is the Shoalwater Bay Indian Tribe in Washington, which received $25 million fiscal year funding 2023 to relocate the tribe because of increased flooding and climate threats. So this is an example of putting your funding where your priorities are. I'm going to highlight 2 more, and then I think we could love to get input from you all. So who's heard of ARPA-I? Oh, great. And so others, have you heard of ARPA-E? So ARPA-I, it is a new agency within DOT, and its mission is to catalyze the development of innovative technology systems, basically capabilities that transform the nation's physical and digital infrastructure to ensure American leadership. So truly, it is less applied, but to develop more for the future. But the focus is future, safe, secure, but equity and access for all. So as you see, the equity and access now is an integral component of anything that TG is doing. I want to highlight, who has heard of the Intersection Safety Challenge? Okay, so same people. You should give this talk, not me. So this is, everybody's very excited about that. Basically, I know it's more applicable to urban environment, but for rural environment, maybe we can apply the same model. Maybe you should lobby your DOT officials to do something for roadside departure. Same premise. It's basically, what are innovative applications of emerging tech using machine vision, sensor fusion, real-time decision to identify and mitigate unsafe conditions involving vehicle and vulnerable road users. So we really have an application, purpose-driven, with high impact. Last but not least, I want to highlight something that's on the road, out on the field right now, and with a closing date of May 10, and this is Complete Street AI. So who has heard of Complete Streets here? Okay, great. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So Complete Streets are streets and networks that prioritize safety, comfort, and connectivity, and destination for all people who use the street. But there was a realization that there's basic data about parts of the transportation network, assets especially, like what are the bike lanes or the sidewalks, are often incomplete and unavailable. So the Complete Street AI initiative was developed or created in an effort to develop a suite of powerful new decision support software tools for state, local, and tribal transportation agencies. So we're looking, it's an SBIR for now, but of course, hopefully there'll be a second phase. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about V2X. who has heard of the V2X plan? Long-awaited plan that DOT has recently had a draft out. So what's the vision? The vision is to enable a safe, efficient, and equitable, sustainable, as you see all these are being repeated through, but basically looking at a national widespread deployment of an interoperable V2X technologies. Now you might say, oh, but V2X is already there, but the truth of the matter, it's very fragmented at this stage, you know, and we need to do better. So moving away from DCRC, the mission is to deploy interoperable V2X connectivity using the dedicated 5.9 GHz spectrum and other available spectrum through collaboration and coordination across federal governments, public sector, and private industry. Now, the plan, I wanted to note that it's not a how-to. This plan is basically defines the mission and vision, and the expectations is that we have a separate deployer resource document that will be made available, hopefully, by the end of 2024. Down to my last two slides. So I think the bottom line that we all are hoping, planning for widespread use of connectivity and automation should dramatically change future mobility ways. But we're not sure, right, how it's going to head. That's still something we have to keep in mind. You all technical solutions, policies from the government can harness these changes. But we need to keep in mind to be flexible as things are changing and heading different ways. So we need to adapt. And this is my final slide, and it's our challenge. Our challenge is just community. So, along with the historic federal investment in the transportation sector, will we be able to leverage emerging tech and resources to institute structural and systemic changes to address the overall persistent traffic safety problem in the US, as well as a level playing field for BIPOC and other historically underserved communities? And I just couldn't help but put the proven safety countermeasure in rural communities. Is anybody aware of that? If not, please just Google it now and pull it up, because the effective countermeasures in this guide, whether delineation, markings, are on the order of 34 to 50% effectiveness. This is huge. Are our new technologies going to give us this kind of effectiveness for everybody? You know, how does that match up? I mean, let's take a look and see where we're heading with all of that. So that was going to be my closing slide, but I'm just going to share one resource, and I added these slides after I attended these sessions the morning. Is anybody aware of the Roots initiative? Routes, okay. Please, it's a great resource. Just Google Routes, and basically it's an initiative that prioritizes the needs of rural America by supporting rural transportation policies and much, much more. There are a lot of resources, webinars, toolkits, funding opportunities, anything you want, anything that's happening in the rural area, you'll find it there. And get on their newsletters. So I just wanted to share that that's a resource for you all to use. And you know, they discuss in the Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, so that's something to be used. And if you wanted to take a picture of that, you can, to get these resources. And I'd love to open it to any discussions or thoughts that you would like to address.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really insightful talk, and we appreciate that. So I think we do have time for a few questions, borrowing 5 minutes from each of the sessions after that, so hopefully we can continue conversation for about 5 minutes. So is there any question?
I'm sorry, I don't know if that's a full question, but just a comment. It's refreshing to have you come and speak about pedestrian access, complete streets, because so many of us that are technologists want to come at it with the new tools, and I think we need to figure out how to make some of the old tools work in conjunction with the new technologies. So thank you for your remarks.
My pleasure. The way I look at it, I mean, I'm a technologist by training, 3 times engineer. So what's the bottom line, right? You know, how can I use my resources to get down to the 0 fatalities and injuries? You know, how can I uplift a certain environment? And I would caution that we should know our history. We should learn what was done before, what was succeeded and not. We're not really reinventing the wheel here.
Hi, Randa. It was a great presentation. So I have a question. So you talked about open, connected, and automated. So that opens up a lot of attack surfaces. So cybersecurity will be predominant. So it should go at the same time. And I want to point out that, so like for safety, you have crash testing, right? So we have the safety rating. So whatever we are doing now for future, the connected, automated, so we need some type of rating, so some type of certification and testing, which we don't have today. So I see that could be a potential risk for the future. Thank you.
Definitely agree and need to be proactive in this area. There's an initiative ongoing. A cybersecurity plan is already underway, and there's a set of toolbox that's being developed. And Ronnie, I can put you in contact with the lead at OSCR who's doing that. That's on a department level. And you're right, we can't be reactive, right? As soon as you do connectivity, there's the intruder problem and privacy issues that, you know, it's good for us to have a plan to deal with these things.
Certification, I think certification testing at the national level.
Yeah.
So I do have one question, Randa. So a lot of these funding opportunities, either universities can be as a sub or lead or whatever, but practically that may not or may happen. Are we tracking the data, how much universities are involved, for example, in Attain and SMART and so on, so that, because if you are talking about transformation rather than doing daily problems that we are facing right now, we need to be a little bit thinking in a way to how we are handling the problems in a transformative way, then universities have to be involved. So are we tracking that data?
Starting to, like SMART, I think I don't have the exact number because they're still looking into the grants that just awarded, but like there's about 30 universities or associated with UTC who were on SMART teams. And this is like the icing on the cake, right? You know, we want to move, that's the whole premise, to move to deployment, have our research drive implementation, and so. Yes, the answer is yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the great talk. I also have one question. So you mentioned the technology that is probably already demonstrated that some area is useful for other areas like rural area. But my concern is that the regulations might be the same, but as you mentioned, like in lower income areas, the number of the death is higher. So those micro behaviors, I don't know what to call it, that certain areas might have, so it's hard to generalize. So a lot of the companies that they are trying to solve this problem, they are trying to come with a general solution. But it should be local, probably startups or companies that look after to these changes and like address them as quick as possible. My concern is just like, do you think these grants that you mentioned can help startups to come up with innovative ideas for these challenges as well?
So I will share just one slide here. The idea is you have to be representative of the different region, the local. I prescribe personally that if we address the most vulnerable, everybody's going to benefit. You know, and we need to start there because of the inequities. So local, You know, you have to think, I mean, there's some things, some underlying generalizations, but you have to work with your local communities. You have to get the stories and get people involved. And the premise is you want something to stick. You want something that stays.
Great, thank you so much. I think with the time and following the agenda, so we have to stop the conversation here, but we can continue the conversation during the networking session, perhaps tomorrow. If Dr. Radwan still is going to be around, hopefully we can continue this conversation. And feel free to stop by and continue this conversation. With that, please join me again and thank Dr. Radwan again for this.
Thank you for having me.